It's pretty big. It's bigger than that one.
Okay, so Article 2, Section 1. Put it in great big letters for you to realize this is about the executive branch. Okay? So what you need to remember is the executive branch is all about the enforcement of laws. This is the police or the military or the president. This is all part of the executive branch. Okay. Section 1 establishes the title of the chief executive. There are lots of different names for the president, nice names. And one of them is chief executive, another one is commander-in-chief, and of course president. And there are a couple additional ones. Those are the ones that are the most common. But those are the titles that are most often used for the president. This also, Section 1 also defines the term of office, which is 4 years. But it also sets up that there is a 2-term limit, meaning president can't serve more than 8 years. Now, up until the 22nd Amendment, which was after President Roosevelt, I'm talking about FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, up until him, it was just a tradition that no president went more than 2 terms. How long did President Roosevelt go for?
68 years.
4 terms, right. He did, but there was something significant about that 4th term. What happened to him during that 4th term?
He died.
He died. He only served a very small portion of it. But the concern was, once that had happened, granted, he was an excellent president, and he really fulfilled the need of the nation at that time. But a major concern was that if there wasn't a limitation, it left the door open for somebody to continue to be a president over a long period of time.
That's when Harry Truman came.
Well, Harry Truman came in as a result of his death. Yeah.
Was he vice president, or did they just reelect?
He was vice president.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then became president. Right. Okay. All right. Also, Section 1 also establishes something known as the Electoral College. An Electoral College is a process, not a place. Okay, first of all, this is an actual process, even though it says college. The Founding Fathers established it in an effort to, basically, they were a little concerned over the population choosing. They just didn't trust the whole population. So they came up with this option. This option is where the population will vote on a group of people, and they will basically do it by voting for that president, or voting for that person they want president. But what happens is, this group of people, and I've got a little video, it does a better job explaining it. These group of people will then go and actually vote for the president. I'm going to show you this video. It's called, and this is, none of you have seen this, I didn't show this last time. This is a very simple, easy way to view the Electoral College. Now we're in the middle, gentlemen, we're in the middle, or I shouldn't say middle, we are at the very beginning of the election process. And we are about to have our lives invaded by media and the number of commercials that we're going to have to look at for the president, which will be huge. But you need to understand that there is a whole process that we're going to go through. And we're going to begin to really talk about that as we move forward. So this is the first of identifying or explaining about the Electoral College. And if I remember, I cannot make it any bigger than this. Right, I can't. So please be quiet, please listen.
Every 4 years, Americans who are 18 or older have a big responsibility. Our votes decide who becomes the President of the United States. Unfortunately, the U.S. election system isn't that simple. It's easy to imagine every U.S. citizen's vote being counted together on Election Day, but this is not the case. U.S. elections are not decided by the total or popular vote, but individual states. Let me explain. It starts with your vote. On election day, you'll vote for president and their vice president. You get one choice. Then, all the votes in your state are counted. The candidate with the most statewide votes becomes the candidate your state supports for president. This happens across the country until each state has selected their candidate. We end up with most of the 50 states and the District of Columbia voting to support one candidate each. But there's a problem. We can't elect a president by just counting up the choices of these states. U.S. states are different. Consider this. California has about 36 million people. Kansas has less than 3 million. We need a way for California's choice to have more influence on the election because the state has more people. The question becomes, how do we make sure each state has the right amount of influence on the election? Well, we need a way to account for the population of each state. As an example, let's consider my home state of North Carolina. Like every state, it is divided up into congressional districts that are based on population. North Carolina has 13 districts, California has 53, and Kansas has 4. When it comes to a state's influence on the election, the number of districts matters most. More population equals more districts equals more influence. The influence a state has in the election is measured by the number of electors. This number comes from the number of districts in a state plus the number of U.S. senators, which is always 2. North Carolina has 15 electors, while California has 55. When a candidate wins the voting in a state, they win that state's number of electors. That's why big, populous states can be so important to candidates. Their electors add up quickly, and the number of electors is what really matters. Here's why. If you add up the electors of all 50 states and the District of Columbia, there are 538 in total. The candidate's goal on election day is to win the majority of 538, or 270 electors. Once a candidate wins enough states to reach the 270 majority, they have won the election and become the president-elect. Yay! So, let's recap. Your vote helps your state choose a single candidate. That candidate receives all the electors from your state. The candidate who can win enough states to reach 270 total electors wins the national election and becomes the president-elect. Then, on the following January 20th, the president-elect is sworn in as the next president of the United States. And it all starts with your vote. Make it count.
Okay,
I think that does as good a job as anything explaining this. Get back to, there you go. All right, so this process is what we're going to see a lot when we look at or watch the TV, especially on election day. The, let's go here. The important thing to remember here are representatives plus senators plus or equals the number of electors. Now, let me show you again a map that will do a little bit more. They showed you a map somewhat, but I really want to show you a map that does a little bit better job of identifying the numbers. So, my fingers get the right place. All right. Okay. Oh, one thing. All right, here we go. Now, this is a current map, relatively current. What I want you to see is that, first of all, they've identified states that tend to be more Democrat or Republican. And you can also see the number of electorals. Can you see how many Ohio has? 18, exactly. So 18 is the number. Now, why are these states the color they are? They are swing states, exactly. Swing states. Define what swing states are. Trey, tell everybody what swing states are. Right, they're pretty much, they can't really tell, for sure. And this is somebody's idea, what they believe is going to happen, although they're not certain. These states tend to be Florida, 29 votes. Then Ohio has 18. Well, Pennsylvania has 20. Then Ohio has 18, and then they go down. You can see Nevada and Colorado have single-digit numbers. So those states, please, will have some. Swing states will have a definite influence. As of right now, according to this poll, Democrats, they believe Democrats have about 219 possible votes, electoral college, because they believe these states will definitely go Democratic. Now, at this point, Republicans have 191. Okay, so they're not that far apart, but they are far apart, which leaves 130 definitely, and of course Ohio is one of the swing states. And they'll talk a lot about Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida in particular, because those have those huge or larger numbers. And then, of course, then these other ones come into play too. All right, so at this point, it's pretty much a toss-up yet. We haven't even begun the process of the primaries. We'll talk more about primaries here very soon, which starts next week. What state starts the primaries? I know I talked about this Friday. Iowa, exactly. All right, so moving on back to our notes. All right, so number of representatives that we have. Number of representatives that we have. Any guesses? We have 18 representatives. Okay. How many senators do we have? 16. I hit the wrong. Yeah, 16. Yeah, 16. Sorry. 18 is what it used to be. Number of senators. Dose. Exactly. Which makes the number of electors what? 18. All right. For our state. For our state. 18. Yes, you need to know that. Congress may determine the time and date the electors cast their vote. So they actually do have a time that they come and vote. It's prior to January 20th, but it's pretty much written in stone that it will be whoever they find to have gotten the 270 electoral votes on the day of the election. So, in order for the president to take an oath, he has to be 35 years old, resident of the U.S. for 14 years, and a natural-born citizen. What's the controversy that raises his head periodically, even though he's almost done with his term, with President Obama?
Probably should have given him a statement he was born.
Yeah. So people continue to bring that up, and it's kind of a non-issue. But there are still people trying to bring it up. Great, can I move forward? Alright. Alright, section 2 of this, Commander-in-Chief. As I said, that's another name for him. This focuses on military, this section in terms of the president. Gives some specific powers to the president. He is in charge of the military forces. He is Commander-in-Chief. Okay. Power extends to having control of the national and foreign policy in war and peacetime. Executive powers. We hear a lot about his executive powers right now. President Obama has used his executive powers far more than any president has ever done, except maybe FDR. Congress may not restrain the president's power to issue pardons, reprieves, except in impeachment cases. And he has the power to appoint federal judges. This is an extremely important section. As you type it up.
Because I'm pretty sure I have it right here. Okay.
No.
But that was on something else too.
We haven't done this yet. You're thinking of this stuff, which was the other. All right. Executive powers. As I said, President Obama has used that far more than most other presidents. Can you tell me, can you give any reason why? Does anybody have a guess? Why he tends to use his executive powers? Okay, how well does the president get along with the Congress? And let's just, for sake of argument, agree that he doesn't get along real well with Congress right now. Who, in general, controls the Congress? Let me say it this way. What party? Republican. Right. Now, that's pretty recent. But even prior to the time when the Republican Party has gained more control, there was still conflict within the Congress. In other words, as far as President Obama was concerned, not much was getting done, and to be honest, not much was. They were fighting each other constantly. They were not getting things done. So, President Obama took advantage of this executive powers that he gained through the Constitution, Article 2, Section 2. These executive powers then makes it possible for him to make decisions and hand it down as though they are law, which has really caused a lot of people to be very, very upset because it tends to be very controversial. What is left out of this system? What you should know, when a president makes this many executive orders, who is he leaving out? writes it, it's almost like law. Well, really it is. Who's he leaving out? Congress. Okay, granted, the president is being voted, we vote for him. And we vote for the Congress. But out of the 6 principles we're talking about, which of these principles is being pretty much sidelined? You want me to remind you of the 6th principle? I have a feeling you probably knew that. Okay. So there's, let me see if I can remember them all. Limited government. There it is. The separation of powers.
Popular sovereignty.
Popular sovereignty. Okay. Separation of powers in one. Popular sovereignty. What else? Anybody else think? I'm sorry? Federalism. Good. What else? Checks and balances. What's that?
I just remembered.
Just remember. I was hoping you were thinking about this. Is there a checks and balance situation here with this? Who's, again, when a president takes this much control, are the checks and balances in place? It's beginning to mean that there should be all 3 balanced. Who's got power here? Certainly the president has stepped in and gained more power. It's concerning. Okay. Now, can't really disagree with him in the fact that he's saying Congress isn't getting anything done because they are so polar opposites anymore. There's no common ground. So, additional powers the president has. He must deliver to Congress an annual address known as State of the Union, given in January. He did that last week. Yeah, a couple weeks ago. That's what I'm saying here, thinking it was a couple weeks ago. Time's kind of flying. Okay, so a couple weeks ago, and it is given in January. President may summon Congress also into extra or special sessions. Doesn't happen very often. The last time it did was when the Congress recessed. Excuse me. The Congress recessed, and they were still struggling with the budget. They pulled them back because it was we were going into a period where people weren't going to be paid and didn't get paid. So the president pulled them into special session. Okay. President has a great deal of power. Then finally, Section 4, President and Vice President and all civil officers in the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for the conviction or for conviction of treason, bribery, or any other high crimes. So they did, the founding fathers made it possible to remove these people should they commit a crime. So they are not, just because they hold a high office, they are not exempt from the same laws that we have, or that we must follow.
Holy Are we recording? Oh my god.
Bash your face. No. When you said that, Eric, when you said that. You gotta do it. I don't know.
All right, is everybody pretty well done checking?
Yeah.
All right, let me move to this. And it would help if I could do this. Oh, come on. There we go. All right, so let's reflect on this question for a little bit. Okay. How can a president send troops to another country essentially going to war when only Congress can declare war? Remember, that was one of the powers Congress had. They can declare war. So how is it possible for the president to do this? Yeah, it doesn't really call a war. Right, it's semantics, it's conflict or whatever, but he can't get away with it, and it has to do back to executive order. Back to that term that we've already talked about. It is, in fact, and this is extremely possible for the president, and it happens all the time. Happens all the time. Okay? That the president, remember, he is commander-in-chief of the military. He's in charge. So he gets to. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Hurry. Well, I'm going on. If you miss this, then.
That's alright. You didn't give me a password.
Yeah. All right. I want to talk to you about a thing called public policy, and I would strongly recommend that you note public policy in what you're writing right now, because public policy affects us quite a bit. Okay, public policy is a means by which government maintains order or addresses the needs of its citizens through actions defined by its constitution. Okay. Public policy has to do with current events. It is not something that is necessarily defined in the Constitution, but the reality is what's going on in our world today can't be defined by our Constitution 200 years ago, more than 200 years ago. Public policy are those things that establishes, and it's too broad to say public policy is this, just this. Public policy are any of the policies that are established through the government over any number of issues. For example, our water supply here is governed by OSHA. And OSHA is an agency that is in charge of a lot of environmental issues. And what they oversee is whether our water is clean or not. Their policies, public policies, for not just National Trail, but for everybody, hopefully ensures that we will have clean water. Okay? Simple as that. These agencies exist. Remember those whole long agencies that were part of Congress? They also have people then that work with them over those same issues, and they are agencies. And this is the bureaucracy that exists. The United States government is the biggest employer in the United States. They employ more people than anybody else. Okay, so big deal. Now, let me show you, I found a video that I want you to pay attention to, because this actually is public policy related to ISIS. Okay, and so here's a guy, he's sitting, he is a professor, and he's going to talk about the public policy that President Obama had with ISIS, and this is actually 2 years old, but it's still a little out of date, but it really shows public policy. So I want to just show it. It's just a couple minutes long. It's a little dry, sorry, but it does give you.
On the question of whether airstrikes will be an effective weapon to deal with the threat from ISIS,
Okay, so the policy is, President Obama's policy, or his decision, are there going to be airstrikes? Should there be airstrikes? What to do with airstrikes? So there's your public policy. This is an international issue, but it affects us as a people. It's a public policy. So this guy, his name is Jack A. Gladstone. He's a Hazel professor of public policy. Okay? George Mason University. He's an expert on public policy. So,
has to realize they're just the first step. ISIS is not a small group of terrorist cells that can be destroyed with a few precision airstrikes. They're a group of tens of thousands of fighters acting as the government of a large region. In fact, a region with millions of people and lots of territory. So even if you're successful with an airstrike in hitting a major center or a base, it just creates an opening, a gap in power, and other ISIS fighters will flow back in, or other groups will take their place. You really can't destroy a group that recruits people on the basis of a radical ideology and a vision of a better life by killing off a few of their leaders or destroying some of their weapons. Now, the airstrikes can help block offensive actions by ISIS and have turned back some of their moves. But in order to really end this threat, we're going to have to see fighters on the ground taking territory away from ISIS. And those fighters will need to believe in something. So the real key is what President Obama is trying to do with our coalition allies and help the Syrian people and the Iraqi people find governments for which they are willing to fight, a society that they're willing to make their own and use as an inspiration to fight against ISIS. At that point, ISIS will be on the defensive and I think can be pushed back, degraded, and destroyed.
okay, so what? Oops! Stop!
Get out of there.
Hit my button. Okay. All right. So the point here, and we'll get back to this. The point I'm trying to get you to understand is public policy, and you'll hear that a lot in the media, talking about public policy this, public policy that, and it is a broad statement, but it means anything that the government does from OSHA, water, to military. So it has a broad meaning, usually connected with current events. Okay, environmental issues, public policy. And you will see, as we look at some of the parties, you will see that the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are really opposed in some of these public policies. One believes one way, one believes the other. So these play a major role in decision making for us. How do we feel about some of these decisions? Do we want Democrats? Do we want Republicans? Are the ideologies of one group over another? and it basically comes out in public policy. All right. Any questions about that? Okay. I'm trying to get through. I want to get done so that we have some time to do other things. Yeah, go ahead. Article 3. Just go ahead and continue with the same one. Don't start anything new. Well, open them back up.
Buddy, that's up to you right there. I mean, whatever.
But those last, we are not in a.
Right, so you can see that we have now switched gears into the judicial branch. Judicial branch, obviously our courts, specifically Supreme Court. What this article does, it empowers courts to decide cases, but limits them to their jurisdiction. In other words, courts can only decide cases within their jurisdiction or their area of expertise. So jurisdiction means their area. Supreme Court obviously has some very specific areas of jurisdiction. Text. I never did a delete text. I also don't delete my email. Yeah. I usually do that once a year though, because I want to be able to go back and find stuff. Yeah, I generally wait until the summer and then do it at some point during the summer. Well, what I should be doing is moving them into stuff that's important to me, into folders, but I never get around to doing that. Okay. Article 3 only establishes one court, the Supreme Court. They don't even really, in the original document, identify some of the powers of the courts, or Supreme Court. It leaves it kind of broad, and over time, the Supreme Court has taken on certain powers. In particular, something known as judicial review. Judicial review. What the Supreme Court does then, under judicial review, and this isn't their only job, but under this, they establish whether laws are constitutional or not. Are they constitutional or not constitutional? So if you know this, if you remember judicial review and connect it to constitutional or unconstitutional, you'll know what judicial review is. Supreme Court is the final say. What their decision is, that's it. They're the final say. There's no higher court. As part of the judicial review, I'm saying judicial rule, and I mean judicial branch. Judicial branch, judges and justices for Supreme Court are given life tenures subject only to removal by impeachment. In other words, all the judges on the Supreme Court can stay there until they die. And many do. some do retire, but many stay until they do that. And so for you to be a Supreme Court judge, it's basically you got a job for life, unless you retire. So, what? They're paid decent. They're paid decent. It's a government job. It's, as in many government jobs, it's not always about how much, it's about all the other perks that go with it. Okay? For a judge, to be honest, I can't say I know everything. Like, for example, they do have a job for life. I mean, they have a constant paycheck for the rest of their life. That's a big perk. But there's also, I know if they are living in D.C., their homes are pretty much paid for. There's a lot of different things that, perks that, and you could probably look it up and just say perks for Supreme Court justices, and they'll probably give you a nice list of different things they do. I've never had it. Yeah, they're subject to all the laws, just like us. They could, and that sometimes happens. It shouldn't, because everybody should be equal. Treatment should be equal. But the reality is, if you hold a higher position of authority, then you are often held to a higher expectation, meaning the punishment could be higher as well. Doesn't always happen that way. In fact, it could be the opposite. Sometimes, and this is true, I know that, I don't know specifically that it was judicial, but I know that members of the government, in particular in D.C., their cars were given license to do just about anything they want. And a lot of times these guys, and here's probably a perk, they have their own drivers and cars supplied for them. Okay, that would be another perk. Although it's not all of them have that. But what's happening is these people, again, remember, I'm not saying just the justices, I'm saying, these guys, whether it be Congress or, would drive their car and stop anywhere, like if they want to go into this deli over here, but all the cars are parked, they'd stop their car and get out and leave their car set right there and get away with it. And, nobody was going to stop them from doing stuff like that. So there's things like that happen. I know that was a huge issue. Also, another issue was there used to be, they've eliminated it because it was so badly abused. You could go in and there was a bank that existed in Congress or in the government. And if you were a member of the government, you could go in and get a loan for pretty low interest rate. Nobody was paying it back. Or they were writing hot checks on their accounts and nobody was paying it back. So a lot of people got into serious trouble over that. Okay. Oops. Okay. Section 2 establishes what type of cases can be heard by the judicial branch. Certain cases may be brought directly to the Supreme Court, but otherwise they come through a series of processes. And we'll look at that. I've got a sheet for you to take a look at. There are only certain cases that can come directly. There's usually those cases that can come directly to the Supreme Court have to do with state against state. So their state Supreme Courts can't handle the problem. It goes straight to the state. Another issue would be that recently had, not recently, it was within the last 10 years, was the issue of Florida's election of what became President Bush and their problems with their election. And that court case went directly to the Supreme Court. Okay, guys. Okay. Under the statute, Supreme Court also exercises what's known as appellate review. So we've got a judicial review, which is whether a law is constitutional or not. And then we have appellate review, and this is the right of the courts to review decisions of lower federal courts or state courts as to whether their decisions were correct or not. So not only can they identify laws that are constitutional or unconstitutional, they can also decide if the courts have the decisions they make are correct or not correct. This is a form of appeal. That's the root for appellate. So we're talking about, it's an appeal issue. I'm going to scroll this a little bit. I think we're at the end, but I want to. Nope, right there. Okay. Section 2 reaffirms the fact that, or doesn't reaffirm it, establishes the fact that anyone accused of the crime has a right to a trial by jury. And then the amendment 6, 7, and 8 will, and 9, will strengthen this. But the founding fathers established this, that the right to trial by jury prior to the Bill of Rights, except in the cases of impeachment. Impeachment, remember, it's not, their jury then becomes the Senate rather than a jury of 12. So they do, in essence, have a jury, but it's not in terms of a trial jury. That's it. Right? That's it? Yes, 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 yes. Yes, good.
Just kidding.
All right, we have one more section, and that's it for today. Oops, I jumped. Oh, darn it. There we go. All right, is that okay, or do I need to scroll up? All right, section 3, our last one for today. This clause limits Congress' ability to define treason or set its punishment as a means of preventing political offenders. Purpose behind this, they got a little afraid that the court could be used to charge Congress or members of Congress for treason when all they're doing is their job. In other words, they wanted to prevent anybody from being able to accuse the Congress of treason or anybody of treason unless it was really treasonable offense. Just because they were doing their job politically and might disagree with the president or whoever doesn't make them a traitor or having committed treason. So what they did is they established or defined treason and said there has to be at least 2 witnesses who will will testify in court that the defendant committed a treasonable act. And just doing their job isn't treason.
like it.
Fear is called God.
All right.
Like uncivilized people. I don't know what they do with their I'm not. Oh, if I like take my things there, it'll. The roll. Oh my god. I have these in my. I feel like I have that. How do I get back home now?
Okay. Go ahead. You can close out of those notes. I have an upload that I want you to send them to, and I need to correct something here very quick. Where is it? I guess I moved that. Yeah. Oh, I hit that. That's what I did. Hang on.
That's a flat world mindset.
Yes. Alright. I have no question for this, but okay, right here. Now, one thing that I'm noticing, throw it. Please listen up. So that you can keep track of your notes more successfully, you should be renaming, when you do a Cornell note, you should be renaming it whatever, yeah, or articles. In this case, we're talking about Article 2 and 3. So you ought to have it named that so that you can readily find it. To just write Cornell notes makes it very difficult to remember what it is that you worked on. So I strongly recommend that you rename, and then in this case, upload to this. James? James, you need to upload. Okay, wake Katie up.
Oh, keep easy.
Wrong Katie.
He's away.
Kate, you need to upload. Everybody should be uploading. Got 7 so far. Okay, Noah, Austin, Nick, Faith, Trey, Levi, Isaac, Justine. So far. That, let's see, who else? Okay, good. Nick, yours is there, or did I say you already?
love those.
Okay, Ham, you're there.
Wait, were you at the Hasty game?
Oh,
Do you remember that foul I got for Indiana? Yeah. Okay, well, how they called the flag out my face. Just,
okay, Eric,
Where are you?
got you. Alexis, I've got you.
it's they, see, I was back in, like, so I just like went like that, and this ref ran.